David Allen Miller in Cosmos, checking on someone about music and other stuff.
Hi, I'm David Allen Miller. Welcome to Cosmos number 4, in which I interview my dear friend Jessie Montgomery, a wonderful composer and human being. Jessie Montgomery, it's great to see you. I guess we've seen each other briefly at a Sphinx event in Detroit a year ago or something like that. But it's great to connect with you again. You're one of my favorite composers and people, and we feel very proud that we were, sort of involved in your emergence as a composer here in Albany.
My second, I think it was the first, technically second, but first real commission for a large symphony orchestra.
Right.
Played on a major stage, so.
Yeah, and it was a beautiful piece, and we played some others of your pieces, and we also had that wonderful residency where you came and you worked with a bunch of kids. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about that, because it was so special and unique and interesting?
Yeah. So I remember that really fondly. That was I came to Albany for I think it was like 7 or 8 visits over the course of an entire semester. Right? It was like January through May or. Right, and I came and worked with 2 schools that were considered sort of on opposite ends of the sort of socioeconomic structure of the city, right?
Right, New Scotland Elementary and
Giffen.
Giffen, we love Giffen, yeah right.
And and we worked. I worked with the kids. These were kids that many of them were English was their second language, and so we were sort of using tools of improvisation and chamber music and listening to help them sort of create. They created their own oratorio.
That was so cool. But what I was really interested in was you have this background as a violinist, which was your primary instrument, and you played professionally. You have this background in improvisation, which is somewhat unusual for violinists. I mean, it's more the purview of jazz instruments, saxophones and trumpets and trombones, etc. And you did really fabulous improvisatory stuff with the kids. Can you talk a little bit about that, how that came into your life? Or?
Absolutely, yeah. So the kind of improvisation work that I have the most experience in is actually in through the work of my very first violin teacher, Alice Knack, who she created this improvisation, this way of teaching improvisation called the creative ability development, which was inspired by her work with Mr. Suzuki, who she was a student of Suzuki's.
Right. In Japan, did she go? To Japan?
She went to visit him in Japan on a big long trip at one point, and I think trained with him for a couple of years. That going back and forth actually.
Right.
So she based her improvisation method sort of on a lot of the tools that are intrinsic to the Suzuki method, like listening, responding, the sort of imitative kind of, the teacher plays something and then you respond by playing back. So using a lot of those sort of tactics in order to develop games and listening exercises for young kids. It started out with young children. She started me doing that work when I was like 7 or even younger than that.
Was that in the city, or was it I remember you did some things in Rhode Island, right? Sorry?
That was at 3rd Street Music School.
Oh, at 3rd Street Music School, yeah, that's a famous place. Yeah.
And anyway, so she was teaching this method from I was age 7 through 12 or so. It was just like, I think, a really formative part of my sort of the way I approach playing the violin, and sort of built in the practice of like tapping into your imagination while you're playing.
But not specifically jazz related. It was really,
no, it's not. It's more improvisation, like the essence of of like just creating something out of nothing. The language was really sort of modal and a little bit sort of tending. The result was always sort of something sounding a little bit folky, like something in between like folk melodies and sort of and then like these modal mixtures, cool things.
And is that kind of how you found your way into composition, or did you even think of yourself as a composer, or when did that transition happen? Or did it, was there a specific point?
It did. It kind of it happened naturally, sort of around not long after my teacher Alice, after she left the school. She left Third Street to go start her own institution in Rochester. But it was around that time I was, around 11 years old, just going into junior high school, and just started writing stuff down. I started taking composition lessons at Third Street. And shout out to Third Street, by the way.
That's such a great place. Yeah, that's a beautiful place.
The programs there were just, they and continue to be so strong. And
for anybody who doesn't know what Third Street is, it's a settlement house, right? It's one of the great old settlement house music schools, and all sorts of other things too.
Exactly, yeah. Started out as a settlement house, and now is an arts sort of hub for young people, and also they have adult classes as well. But music, dance, and theater.
And then through high school, and did you work with Derek at some point, right?
Say again?
You worked with Derek Bromell at some point, or was that later?
Yes, yeah. So I mean, the way I met Derek was interesting because my dad ran a music studio when I was a kid. That was his business. That was sort of what I grew up in. Was his music studio that he had on Avenue A, between Second and Third Street. And Derek knew my dad because of that, because Derek actually ended up putting on some music there and also like renting studio space from him. So it was kind of this natural thing. He's like, hey, my kid,
wants to be a composer. Right?
Wants to be a composer. Yeah, will you sit down and talk to her? And Derek gave me my first like real opportunities, like through some of the young composer apprentice programs in the city.
Did you do the New York Youth Symphony one? Is that making score or what?
The first one was actually through the Chamber Music Society at Lincoln Center, and it was called the Lincoln Center Young Composers Apprentice Program.
Oh, that sounds right.
Yeah, and it doesn't exist as that anymore, but now it's the young people's composers, very young composers.
Very young composers. That's a great program that John Deek is running.
So I think this was sort of the early seeds of that program. And so that was how the relationship with Derek sort of began way back then.
And then did you go to college or conservatory in violin? Is that what happened? Or?
Yes. So I went to Juilliard for my undergrad. And then, and so I was a New York kid all the way through.
And did you do composition while you were at Juilliard, or did you just kind of leave it alone at that point? Or?
I did not study composition at Juilliard specifically, but it was when I was in my junior year that I sort of reconnected with Derek. And started taking composition lessons outside of Juilliard. I only studied, it was very much focused on my playing.
Right. And you've had a wonderful playing career too. I know you were very much involved with Sphinx, and I'm not sure that our people listening know what Sphinx is, but maybe give us a little bit of a background, because I know you're one of their superstar discoveries over the years, right?
Right, so Sphinx is a wonderful organization. They do tremendous work in the field of diversity in classical music and creating opportunities for specifically Black and Latino string players specifically. But they do have a wide network of musicians that includes like, an entire symphony orchestra's worth of musicians and also singers that all sort of make up the network of Sphinx. But yeah, I mean, they have a competition every year that began in 1997, and I did their competition for the first time in 1999. Right. So I've been affiliated with them since then, and have since played in the Sphinx Virtuosi and the Catalyst Quartet, and taught at their music camps, and have sat on panels, and anyway, so the relationship has blossomed. And this year, I also received one of their hugest honors, which was an incredible experience. It was right before this coronavirus broke out. It was actually the week prior, March 4th. There was a big award ceremony for the Sphinx Medals of Honor. Sorry, Sphinx, are you editing this?
Maybe. We'd rather not.
First, it's called the Sphinx Medal of Excellence. That's the title of the award. And it's an incredible event that happened at the Supreme Court and at the
Oh,
Center. Yeah, so that was like sort of over the years, it was just really a huge honor to receive that recognition, and at this point, as
And I
things are starting to move along. So
yeah, and I should add that Sphinx has an annual conference that they run that actually culminates in that competition, and I had the good fortune to attend it last year. And it's an amazing, most of the week, they're based in Detroit, even though they're very much national and maybe even international. And it's just a whole bunch of amazing sessions about addressing this question of diversity, and filled with young people and passionate people. And I had the greatest week there. I was so impressed by it.
Great job with that.
It's really an amazing thing.
Fun. Yeah, and they make it fun too. It makes it, easy, facilitates the sort of networking aspect of their, that's like part of their ethos, is like this idea of connection and getting people sort of excited about collaboration, and so they do a really wonderful job of that every year.
Yeah, and I must say, without wanting to sound overly hyperbolic, what's been really exciting for us, all of us who know you and have worked with you and have helped foster, nurture your career, and I should say that I think the first time I ever heard a piece of yours was that wonderful piece, Banner. Is it called Banner?
Banner. Yes.
Yeah, that the Sphinx Virtuosi played at Carnegie Hall some years ago, right? But your career has just really taken off in the last few years, and now you've got commissions from lots of really major institutions. So tell me a little bit about where you are now, career-wise, and what's coming up that's particularly exciting.
Sure. A lot of things, well, as we know, there's a lot of things that have shifted around in terms of what's what and what's being put on and what's not in the future. But if all goes as planned,
Which surely won't. It'll go later than planned, maybe a year later than planned.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So I'm was selected as one of the 19 composers for the Project 19 initiative with the New York Philharmonic. So I am due to have a premiere with the New York Philharmonic during their opening season weekend in September, this coming September.
And I should say that's 19 composers who happen to be women.
Correct.
And they're spreading them over a few seasons. They had the first few this season that were quite wonderful.
Right. And
yeah,
it was
and
this in commemoration of the 19th Amendment, and to celebrate the voices of composers who happen to be women. Yeah.
Right, and if all goes well, we'll also be featuring you on our opening concert, assuming that there are concerts in September, with a piece that I think the Philadelphia Orchestra kind of unofficially closed their season with, because it was closed quite abruptly, right?
Yes, Coincident Dances.
Tell us a little bit about that piece, about Coincident Dances. I think it kind of reflects your childhood or your youth.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. It sort of reflects my attitude about music in the city, and my sort of like, the sense of, that you can walk down the street at any moment and hear like really seemingly opposing styles or genres of music all kind of mushing together at once. And so I just kind of played around with that idea and there's one point in the center of the piece that's got this big like samba in 7/8 with a waltz, with a slow waltz underneath it.
Right.
They're like, sort of went for everything, but plus the kitchen sink with that piece. So it's really fun to write. And then some sort of hearkening to this sort of folk song that would be played on a kalimba.
Right.
The little
African instrument.
Yeah,
African little plucked instrument.
That kind of style of tune.
Right.
And some other fun sort of like dance track kind of groove stuff. So it kind of has a lot.
We're looking forward to it. We'll do it in September, or if September doesn't come to pass as planned, then we'll do it later than September. But we'll definitely do it. So that's a real interesting question I always find for the younger composers with whom we work, this question of language, because there's such an absolute explosion of language available with all the ways we can sample or experience every imaginable kind of music from the past, present, almost the future. How do you find your voice as an emerging composer in the world in New York City today?
That's a really good question. In a way, it's about tuning all of it out. It's about being I spend my time listening and exploring and going down rabbit holes on YouTube, listening to different styles of music, and anything I feel like sort of drawn toward, I'll go for it and just go on a listening expedition,
Right.
And then take some notes. Sometimes I take written notes. I just sort of brainstorm. I think things through in terms of how I interpret what I'm hearing, and then I throw it all to the side, and then I have to tune out, and then sort of let whatever comes up come up, and then you just go. Then you're in the process of being a composer, which is like for me, it's about shutting off all the noise and really trying to allow the impulses to lead me while I'm writing, and the results, they're changing. Things are changing. I mean, I notice there's things about my music that are, I'm like, oh, that's becoming a thing that comes back and comes back and comes back, right. Which I think is a good thing. I think that's okay. And then and then some new things are starting to emerge also. And sort of, I feel like this time, the time that we've sort of been accidentally donated right now.
Yes. Right. Our long cruise vacation, whether you want it or not, right?
Right. Yeah. I've been it's been good in a way, because I've been able to sort of dive into some ideas that I've had inklings about, but now I can really sort of flesh them out and screw them up and and try to sort of get through them a little bit. So
I have to say also that I've noticed, because I've been tracking your music ever since I first heard Banner, and I noticed, like in this new piece we're going to be doing, that there's a real maturity to your craft personship that I think has really evolved. So as to how that happens, it may just be partially maturation or having lots of different experiences. Or I was also wondering, are there other formative figures or sort of antecedents who do you look to in addition to Derek? Who were your most wonderful teachers, or who trained you? I feel in a certain way like I always feel like with composers, the best composers are the ones who feel comfortable having permission to be wild. And it sounds like your first experience with your violin teacher was what kind of gave you that initially. That's really powerful. Yeah. Yeah,
for sure. And that's interesting that you mentioned that, in terms of feeling that as I felt, you feel that way as a kid. You're just exploring, right? And then there's a point at which you start to sort of question everything and start to figure out how things really work. And then you can analyze yourself into a place of, block. Actually.
Paralysis, I think is the term.
Yeah. And I feel like I've, with composing, I've had to, I've gone through an interesting process with that, because I've sort of come to it as a practicing musician. And sometimes it's really easy for me to get in a rut, because with composing, there are methods in which to extract, more material from one piece of material, but there's no right way. There's no right path to perfecting this section of music,
Right.
So you're constantly discovering what that is. And I think that, in terms of somebody who's sort of helped guide me through that process a lot recently is Laura Kaminsky.
Oh yeah.
Over the few years, she's been a teacher, mentor, friend. We most recently we were at the Hermitage Artist Retreat in Florida together. She's been going there for many years, and I was there this past winter, and we hadn't seen each other in a long time, and I was working really hard. I was having a very difficult time writing this piece that I was working on for the actually it was for the National Cathedral Choral Society. And it's because it was so massive. It's the first piece of that size for full chorus, children's chorus, and full orchestra.
Really?
This is the biggest forces I'd ever dealt with, and so I was really intimidated by it, and I was having some issues, and so it just having her around and to sort of just talk through. I mean, composer guidance is a lot like kind of like therapy. Like you're going to talk the person like off the ledge a little bit.
Off the ledge, right. I've been hearing that from the different composers I've been talking to, that teaching composition is often a lot more like therapy than it is like actual violin teaching, for example.
Or like Joan Tower called it. She said, you know, I'm not like really a composing teacher. I'm more like a traffic cop.
Right.
It, which I thought was so great.
And you worked with her a little bit also, is that right?
I worked with her, yes. I've had great opportunity to work with her over the years.
Were you ever at Bard, or was it just kind of...
No, it was through a program that sadly is no longer, but it was called the Deer Valley Music Festival in Utah. And I worked with her both as a quartet player, playing her and some of her students' pieces at the time. And then the next year later or so, I came back and was there as a composer, working with her more closely on my own pieces, and then we touched stuff over the years, and so she's also been like an incredible just example of she's
great spirit
life as a composer and do really well, and I just think that she's got a great sense of humor, and
yes, she does, a fantastic sense of humor. So tell me, do you still play a lot, or are you pretty much transitioning from violin playing to composition, or is it possible to do both? Or
that's always a tough one, because I always want to say it's 50-50, and it is. I just it's and I'm trying to find like what are the ways in which violin is going to serve me most right now in my life. The idea of not playing doesn't really make sense to me as a life path, I think. So I've been doing some work with Alarm Will Sound.
Great. As a performer,
yeah. I played with them in St. Louis, like in late January. So that was really fun. And I'm sort of working on some of my own projects that are yet to be. I don't want to say too much about
Hopefully combining your compositional work with your performing work. And
yes.
Great. That sounds really thrilling.
Working on a project that allows me to do that all sort of in one package.
That's great. And are you okay in the city? You're right in the epicenter of all this stuff, right? Is that?
Yeah. I mean, we're okay. We're good. I'm quarantining here with my dad, who's in from Germany. And so we get along just great, so we're fine,
Really good to have some family around. That's really nice.
To have family around, absolutely.
That's great.
And and we have the grocery stores right on the corner because we're in the East Village.
Oh, good.
We have all of our amenities are right here. Drugstores down the street, the groceries on the corner. Everyone seems to be pretty, for the most, I'd say 85%. Abiding by the rules of
distancing rules,
masks and being safe, and I feel fairly confident walking down the street. A lot of this stuff has to do with especially like all New York things, it has to do with attitude.
Right.
What's your attitude about the situation? Like you can go outside and just have a good attitude and stay cool with everybody, then you're going to be fine.
Right. It must be good for you because it's really, the East Village is really your homeland, right? Is that
right?
That's where you spent much or most of your formidable years, or your formative years?
Yeah, my formidable and formative.
Formative years. I'm sure your formative years were formidable. Yeah.
I've been seeing all my neighbors that I grew up with. I was here. I grew up on this neighborhood and was here all the way, even through college. I stayed 1 year at Juilliard and I moved back downtown.
Did you? So you've really been there. It's really
I've seen more of my neighbors. It feels a little bit weirdly like more neighborly now than ever. Because you actually see people more. And anyway.
But that's a beautiful thing. That's
kind
thing.
of nice.
Yeah. Anything else I should ask you, or you want to say, or?
Well, I just thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for talking to me. I so appreciate it.
Thank you for for doing this.
Yeah, well, I want to check in with my friends, and especially with my composer friends, and just hear how you're doing and what you're doing, and make sure you're safe and well and all that. So,
David. And you too, I presume.
We're all good. We're just sad not to be able to get the orchestra together, and it's very hard, as you know, being a musician, as a performing musician.
Right.
You know that the people on whom it's falling the hardest are the freelance musicians who go from orchestra to orchestra or gig to gig, and some of that is really tough. People who rely entirely on that, it's like all the work has gone away. So it's a hard time for a lot of our colleagues.
Very difficult.
But we're working to get it back together in as many forms as possible: virtual, semi-virtual, fully not virtual, and we'll be back on the stage as soon as they let us be there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a chamber. Maybe it's like Bartok, percussion and strings. Maybe with like social distance on the stage.
Right. We're working on that. And I really like the idea of the drive-in concert, of putting everybody at 20-foot distances from each other in a drive-in, and let the audience drive up in their cars. So we're working on that too, and all sorts of stuff.
I love it.
I think there are solutions. It's just that we have to kind of think.
It's fun to think out of the box. I mean, we're gonna we have to do it in some way. I've had some resistance to it, of course, just like anyone, but.
Yeah, I think it's we'll find a way, because art wants to exist. It's amazing how much impulse we all have to try to make art and share art and celebrate beauty. So I think we'll all find ways. Yeah. Well, great to talk to you, Jessie. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, you too, David. Yeah.
Stay safe.
Well, thank you. You too.
And send my best to your folks.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right, bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye.